So, actually, this is Jonathan Moxon, who's currently Leeds City Council's Chief Flood Risk Officer. Is that a fair description? What's the actual title?
Flood Risk Manager.
For Leeds City Council.
Yep.
And this is Rosa Foster, who actually lives in Shipley and is also the catchment manager for the Upper Air. Is that right?
Yep.
Is that, what's the job description? I know it changes every 5 minutes.
They do change a lot.
For the Environment Agency.
At the Environment
At the Environment Agency. And Jonathan used to be at the Environment Agency. And so these guys were kind of on the front line with what happened in the Aire Valley and in Calderdale as well, not far from here, during the big flood in 2015. So, do you guys want to say anything, just in direct response to the performance or memories of what happened at that time?
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. I've seen this twice now. It's I don't know if you. I suppose it depends on your background. I don't know if you work in academia or whether you work in flood risk from a day job point of view, or whether you've no connection with it. I'm assuming you probably do because you're here probably for the conference. But things like this are really important because I'm actually very emotional. It's really weird. So I worked every day through the Cumbria floods, but actually based in Leeds as a day job, but I went up there and helped out. And then when that finished, we thought, well, I just can't imagine us seeing a flood like that again within such a short space of time. and then we ended up in the incident room in Leeds as part of I worked in the Environment Agency then. And what we thought was coming just seemed biblical, really, in what we'd seen. And then you sit back from that and you think, I spent every evening, I was actually on night shifts, I spent every evening for about a month in the incident room dealing with the initial event as Steve's described. But it's really weird seeing it played back from the eyes of the people that were going through it, because what you're in, as an incident duty manager, you're actually in a room that's not flooding, and you're not surrounded by people that are pulling carpets up or packing stuff into their loft and things like that. And you probably don't get to see that for weeks and weeks because you're in an incident room dealing with it. And then, but you know, I've worked in flood risk a long time, and you know that this is the impact on people. But it's very easy to forget why you do what you do, and the impact is so powerful on people. And it's not necessarily these people that end up on the 10 o'clock news or on the telly on the morning. It's these guys are sort of behind the scenes. I don't even think the world would have known that Philip and others were going through this. And you just forget that even as someone who lives and breathes flood risk, you forget that the impact's just so stark. And I think something like this is just so important. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things, this is the first time I've done this performance. I've done it quite a lot of times over the last year, but I've only just got around to adding in Brian. The reason he's actually slightly shorter is he's actually a child toy because I ran out of adults. But then I made the joke about him being further away. But it felt, I actually interviewed Brian after I'd done the original version of this show. But it felt really important to add him in because he's a business, not a home. And actually we forget, I think one of the things that people easily forget is, businesses, they'll get their insurance and they'll, but actually it can be just as stark and devastating for businesses. I know you dealt with a lot of that in Calderdale, didn't you, Rosa?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess one of the standout moments for me was when we went to the Calderdale Council, had a full, not full council, but they made a public meeting of their council, executive council meeting. And we went in attendance as the Environment Agency, as a partner involved in the flooding. And one of the ladies who's the lead on business economic development for the council stood up and sort of went through some statistics for that council area. And it was 70% of the businesses that had been affected didn't have insurance because of a series of events in 2012. And that's just such a high proportion. And when you understand how that valley works, which is very different to the Aire, but where it's very contained, where people are very local they work very locally to where they live, and just the compound impact of that flood event. So the businesses are uninsured, the jobs are not safe, your home is flooded, your school is flooded, your children's school is closed for a number of months. If you're really poor, the cash machines are out, you can't get your electricity meter card charged up, the shops are shut. The nearest place to go for those things is a 15-mile drive. You haven't got a car, the bus services aren't running because it's a single road up the valley, and it's just that absolute direct and quite long impact on people's ability to just live a normal life. I'm very mindful, obviously, the context of this, and we've got the impacts of the hurricane in Texas and then the flooding in Southeast Asia. But wherever it is, flooding is a very direct and shocking event when it happens to people, and that's very, very stressful. It's easy to forget when you're working on the numbers and the graphs and the charts and the flood warnings, and just the language in that warning. You can hear the emergency planners writing it, but what does it mean? And the final update that you said as well that Philip got. The first bit doesn't apply in that situation. So there's always learning to get it better, to help people.
Has anybody got any questions or observations? Yeah.
So there was a few things that maybe could have been improved in this situation. So there was this neighborhood there that didn't get a warning at all because they were off the flood maps. And there was this dam here that was built too low anyhow, but then there were debris and it was going to happen, and so in this particular area, what has changed since Boxing Day this year, that year? I mean, has anything really improved in terms of managing the next flood?
It's a very good question. These things take a long time. Developing capital schemes and work, understanding what happened, gathering all of that information, doing the modelling work. I'm hoping some of your academics can understand how long that work takes. It takes a really long time. And yeah, of course, we've gone through one winter. We'll be going through another one very soon. And no, physically, on the ground, not a great deal has changed.
I think the flood warning for Branksome Drive existed.
Yeah, it didn't go.
And I think there's a flip side, I suppose, to this, and it'd be very interesting at some point to see these two situations played out alongside each other or in parallel, would be to see what's going on, some of the conversations that happen in the incident room or the incident rooms of various organisations that are trying to manage either the messaging that go out to the public and the businesses, or the dialogue that happens with residents that are phoning in and things like that on that side. And I suppose to play that back, at around the time that the warning should have been issued for Branksome Drive, that same team were issuing 9 severe flood warnings for the centre of Leeds, and 9 severe flood warnings for the Calder Valley, exactly the same time. And severe warnings come not off a specific trigger, so they're not triggered in the same way that these messages will be triggered. So it's not about the river level getting to a point, it's about judgment, and it's about, is there now an imminent risk to life or infrastructure that affect lots of people's lives. And so that was going on, and I think it's just playing that back of, actually, you've probably got a real interesting and awful almost contrast in someone like Philip probably staying up all night, watching the river and being a bit confused about the messages that he's getting. But actually at the same time, down the road, whatever it is, 15 miles down the road in Leeds, there'd be an incident room that's been open for days and days, with people run ragged for days and days, dealing with direct asks for information from COBRA, which is the government's cabinet office, briefing rooms. So that's the way that number 10 get their information. I can vouch categorically that they were directly asking people like me. I want to know the numbers, I want to know how many, I want to know what the river's doing next. But yet, Philip's asking that same question as well. And so you've got this mad sort of situation where you're trying to warn the public all at once, because you don't want to tell them it's flooding when it's not. But you can see from the quality of messages that actually that means very different things for different people that live in the same stretch of river. And actually trying to balance all sorts of different things as an incident manager or as a person playing an incident role. You've got to balance all these different things at that time, and it goes on for days and days. But yeah, that situation is going on for days and days and months, and in fact years for these guys. But they're probably sat on their own, potentially. Think about Margaret on the end there. She's probably sat on her own, wondering what the hell's going on, not getting that information directly, and then, down the road there's probably the person that she would really, really need to speak to, but you can't have that conversation with the, whatever there was, 30,000 people that want to know that information at that time.
I think in terms of the performance, what really strikes me, just to follow on from that, it's a bit tangential to what you asked about, but is the starkness of just comes like a mini lightning rod in the stress and difficulty. Is that communication out from what we know is a room full of people, working incredibly hard with their hearts in their mouths, knowing that this is happening to people and feeling like they're doing everything that they possibly can at that point in time to help those people. But what comes out is this cold, confusing message, and then that's the bridge that you've got to cross when you come back out to the communities and we're in our day jobs. We're going back out and going, right, tell us about it, what happened? Like, but we just got this message, and like, oh my God, but we worked so hard, we tried, we really tried, and the emotions run high very quickly on both sides, and just trying all the time, just going, actually, I was paid, that's my job, it's my profession, my heart might be in it as much as if, it's vocational, but actually it's my job, and for you, this is your life. And just recognising that difference and getting over your personal commitment to what you're doing. That's difficult when people are putting in those hours when they haven't seen their kids for 3 weeks. They've called in all the favours that they can from their family and their neighbours and their friends to do school drops and all the rest of it to service that need for the first month. But in comparison, it's nothing. Have to get over it.
Any other questions or observations? Yes.
Hi, I found this really fascinating, the way you told the story and the different points of view. My research is actually on the Upper Calder Valley from the 2015 floods, and there you saw a lot of citizens taking action themselves in the aftermath of the floods, and some people wanted to put pressure on the local authorities and the Environment Agency, and then they also took some practical action themselves afterwards. I was wondering if you saw any of this in the stories or when you were talking to people or from your roles. And I also wondered, as an extension, it seems that perhaps trust might have been damaged between yourselves and the people who were there. I mean, did you think this happened, and how has this changed since then?
So it's very good questions. There's a lot in there. So in terms of the way that the Upper Calder Valley responded and responded at the time, again, it's partly because the nature of the flood necessitates that response because they get so isolated. But the learning from that has absolutely been taken out. So Bingley now has. So in terms of things on the ground, it's not a physical change in terms of that bridge, which is going to be hideously hard to change. But the resilience of the communities should be higher. Bradford Council have worked with us and the communities, particularly in Bingley, but also in Belden around flood resilience centres and getting some kit and being just a lot more able to recover very quickly if it does happen again. And flood warden groups have been established as well, so there's a lot more community outreach. I think for the River Aire, unlike Calderdale, there wasn't an awareness really for small isolated pockets. People were aware it would come up, it would get quite close, but then it would go away. There wasn't, there were lots, I think a lot of people were just really shocked it happened. So in terms of the trust question, I don't think the trust was broken, it was shock. For some people, less trust breaking, more just extreme frustration with the housing providers. For the lady at the end, I've met her and spent an hour and a half with her, and it's just almost counselling, because there's so little you can do. There's nothing I can do from my role to help her other than listen. And the same for a number of other people, where they were really impacted, that frustration on the services. But I think, and we haven't talked about it, but within Leeds and the Kirkstall area, the groundswell of community response there is helping to establish a different way of working in the council and partners, which is going across the whole district for areas that didn't flood on Boxing Day, but actually have a higher degree of flood risk. And we saw an incident just a couple of weeks ago on Whitebeck in East Leeds, where the river rose 1.3 metres in 10 minutes. And we also have a flood siren there, as in the Upper Calder Valley, and that was sounded. And Jonathan, you went out and met a lot of the people around that as well. But yeah, so that principle of increased community resilience and ownership of that, but doing it as hubs and working with the councils to do it, something the Environment Agency really supports, and both Bradford Council, Leeds Council, Calderdale are fully doing what they can to reinforce that.
In response to your citizen question, I mean, it's worth saying that I interviewed a lot more people than these people that you end up in the story, some of whom were people that I knew in this area, and of course in Leeds there's a lot of others as well who really did take it upon themselves to try to help, founding kind of voluntary flood groups and doing, organising cleanups through Facebook and all this kind of thing. And that, if I'd had more time to tell the story, that probably would be the next act, but I think that might start to get a bit unwieldy. So at a certain point I just went, no, it's just people who have directly been impacted in the story. But yeah, that is another really important part of the story, I think, is that I've spent a lot of time interviewing people just to ask them why did you feel it's your responsibility to try and do something when maybe your neighbour at home is just watching television, so, and I think there's a really interesting set of questions there as well about what it is that motivates people to go, I want to do something.
That's a thing around when you say about trust, because actually the product, people's response and the product of the flooding was actually that they took some steps to do things that actually we would want them to do all the time. And that thing around, you can't have one room of people in Leeds trying to manage a flood for the whole of West Yorkshire effectively, when actually if everybody was aware of that risk and didn't know what they'd do next, it would knit together. And actually then, in the face of it, there's a real, it really undermines that trust, because they really feel like the Environment Agency, the council or whoever should have been doing that on their behalf. And a lot of people then step in, weren't flooded, but felt that nobody else was doing anything. So they really felt like they'd been let down, or that the people that had been flooded had been let down. They were the only ones. And I heard that message a lot of, we've had to do this because you are not doing it. When actually, that was the right thing to do all along. And actually, that's a fantastic thing. And it wasn't that as an Environment Agency employee then, or as a council employee now, that's a really important thing that people can do. And 100% support it and spend a lot of time supporting it. But you're starting from a position of people really feel like, well, you've let me down and I'm having to do it. But actually, if we'd all had the time to step back before it happened or press the pause button, that's exactly the response that it needed. Because we needed that help, in fairness, and we should admit that. But it felt like that relationship was damaged right from the start, I think, because people felt we've let us down and we've had to do it.
Great. Yeah, okay, we'll take one more question and then probably time to wind up.
Have you recently talked to the same people?
Yeah, let me see. I was in touch with Brian recently. I was in touch with Linda recently. Margaret a little bit earlier in the year. Philip, I talk to quite often. These guys I haven't spoken to for a while. So yeah, it varies.
Get regular letters
See,
from
the interesting.
and from Bankstone Drive.
How is this? Is this still affecting their lives? They've come back in and everything. But how?
For sure, yeah. Yeah, and one of the things that you get a lot of along this stretch, particularly, is people going, "When are you going to do something about the debris in the river?" There's the area around Belden Bridge and immediately downstream of it. There's been a lot of vehicles and shopping trolleys and all kinds of stuff that's been lying in the river for quite a long time, as well as a lot of stuff hanging in the trees. And they finally, just last week, started a big clean-up of that with
I was there.
yeah. You know, again, it takes time to organise these things sometimes, and now people are going, well, there's a car up here in the, you know, and so, and I guess you guys are having to make judgment calls in those situations about what is actually an obstacle or adding to flood risk, or what can afford to lie there for a little bit, and so on. But people, you know, very actively are concerned about these things because they think it's adding to the risk next time, you know, and that breach continues to aggravate people and so on and so forth. Yeah. So, and this is just one, you know, the important thing, as I said right at the beginning, this could be anywhere really, and it's not even that big of not that many people are affected on this stretch, but I suppose it's that thing again about the little stories, you know, that's the metaphor, if you like, it's like, for the people it happens to, it's pretty big, you know. So, yeah.
Well, I met Brian at Christmas time when I first saw this performance, and we were talking about what could be happening and so on, and he said, it's just been such a horrendous year, I just want to forget about it. And you can totally understand that, but on the other hand, that's the danger, you know, that's when it's most vulnerable. So it's the thing I've been reflecting on since that conversation actually, is how you can keep having the conversation without dredging up all of that stress and anxiety, so that they feel empowered and will still keep talking to you, and potentially, like with Philip, potentially become a flood warden. So if Philip wasn't phoning up our hotline to get information, but was phoning up empowered to say, guys, the river level is still rising, what's next? You know, and was part of that network, like Jonathan was saying, knitted into it, the eyes and ears on the ground, that's so essential when you're managing that incident. You've got so many calls on your time. It would feel quite different. But yeah, how to keep the conversation going about that ongoing resilience. Like, actually, it hasn't happened. Maybe it just was a one-off. You know, we know the climate change predictions. We know it's increasingly uncertain. So how to keep that conversation out, impacting people's well-being. It's hard.
There's 2 points I want to make.
Yeah, please.
We could talk for hours and hours on this. I really, really enjoyed this.
Thank you.
The first one I'm going to ask is probably the hardest question: is what is the consequences of your action with these people? So think on that one. Ask the first question, which is this thing that people think about: a flood comes up, it goes down, there's damage, and life goes on. In the Alberta flood in 2013, 5 people died in the flood. 47 people died within the following year as a result of depression, suicide, health effects from the flood. And you have whole segments of populations who suffer in the long term. And so I'm asking, the first question I asked is because the fact that you're interviewing them, talking to them, and helping them, you're basically playing a role as a counselor, involving, because most of these people have nowhere to turn. 4 years after the event in 2013, we still have 200 families living in trailers.
Wow.
When will they, and they're First Nations people. So there's issues of racism and this, and when is the action? I have a personal friend who took 2 years fighting with the provincial government and the insurance company as to what part of her house was totally destroyed. So the damage that comes to human health and particularly mental health is well underplayed in a lot of it.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, that question about, I mean, I wouldn't claim any great impact for me talking to people or whatever, but I do think it's interesting, you know, research ethics, and we all have to fill out these forms and say we're talking to human subjects and all this kind of thing. And so we're kind of attuned to be terribly kind of cautious about, is it okay if you might be traumatized, is it okay if I talk to you, and so on. And actually, in my experience, these people were all only too happy to talk about it, because it's sharing their story with somebody, and then to have it relayed. I mean, obviously people didn't want their surnames shared and that kind of thing, but I think there was that thing of just like, just getting it off my chest.
But it's that one question of research ethics that you must understand that you have had an effect on the success of those people
Possibly, yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess what I'm saying is that I think sometimes in academia we can be overly cautious about whether it's okay to talk to people when actually people probably are more than happy to be talked to. And actually one of the reasons that this ended up the way it did, I mean, okay, I made it for a festival, so it had to entertain people as well as tell a serious story. But actually one of the striking things about the attitudes of a lot of these people I spoke to was that there's a real black humour about the way they talked about stuff, which I hope comes across a little bit in the story too, you know. Because I think one of the ways you survive and get through stuff is kind of trying to see the funny side in a kind of dark way, you know. I would just say, by the way, that I've been involved in kind of community-based activities in this area for quite a long time now, trying to kind of engage people with water issues. We started actually back in 2012, and there's a pile of reports there on the 2012 to 13 multi-story water project that I did that was originally kind of targeted at raising flood risk awareness, but through the arts and so on. And that, if anybody fancies that, there's a DVD in the back and everything. They're free, they're left over, so help yourself. But yeah, the result of that was that quite a few of these people I already knew when this happened to them, so I was able to go back and kind of talk to them about it. You know, so there's something to be said for kind of ongoing engagement, I think, in these kind of community contexts. You know. Anyway, great. We've probably chatted on long enough. There's a reception. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Do you all know where it is?
Yes.
Great. Well, if you want to, I think we're all coming along to that. So if you want to talk to the three of us any more, please feel free. Or if you've had enough of us, talk to somebody else. Thank you very much for coming.